came with the right and stuck him with that jab before he went down. But even then, I thought he was going to get up. But once I seen him looking around for that mouthpiece, I knew he was hurt because, you were trained to, get up.
I was so proud of myself in that fight. That was my favorite, best fight ever. I always say that was my favorite fight because I didn't know how many punches I took and I wanted to fight and I saw myself picking up that mouthpiece and I was so proud.
Amazing.
I was proud of myself. I didn't know where I was.
He's the strongest man on the planet. That's what they said about Mike Tyson. But when Buster Douglas named his 3 toughest opponents, he didn't just talk about power. He talked about heart, discipline, and focus. 3 very different fighters, 3 very different battles. And the answers might surprise you. Let's start with the fight that changed everything. February 11th, 1990, Tokyo, Japan. Buster Douglas steps into the ring as a 42-1 underdog. Nobody thinks he can win, nobody except Douglas himself. Across from him stands Iron Mike Tyson, undefeated, undisputed, 37 wins, 0 losses, 33 knockouts. Tyson is considered the baddest man on the planet. He's the heavyweight champion of the world, and he looks unstoppable. But Douglas has something nobody can see on paper. 3 weeks before the fight, his mother died from a heart attack. Her name was Lula Pearl. Douglas promised her he would win this fight. That promise becomes his fuel. While Tyson parties in Tokyo and barely prepares, Douglas trains with quiet determination. He channels his grief into focus, and when the bell rings, something unexpected happens. Douglas doesn't run. He doesn't back down. He starts working his jab. Not just a regular jab, a monster jab. He hangs it on Tyson's head like a frame. This disrupts Tyson's rhythm completely. Tyson likes to slip punches and get inside, but Douglas won't let him. Every time Tyson tries to move, that jab is there, waiting, controlling, creating distance. Douglas also uses something called a collar tie. He grabs Tyson's head and left arm. He steers him off balance. He forces Tyson to circle away from his power side. When other fighters pivot away from Tyson, they walk right into his hooks. But Douglas stands his ground. He smothers Tyson's attacks. He uses his elbow to stop Tyson's head movement. And when Tyson corners him, Douglas fires back in furious bursts. Round after round, Douglas executes a perfect game plan. He's 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. Tyson is 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. Douglas uses every inch of that advantage. He keeps Tyson at the end of his punches. He controls the ring geometry. He makes Tyson work for everything. Then comes the 8th round. Tyson lands a vicious uppercut. Douglas crashes to the canvas. The crowd gasps. Is this the end? Did Tyson just prove everyone right? But watch what happens next. Douglas is hurt, but he's listening to the count. He makes sure to get up at 9. He's aware. He's coherent. He beats the count and survives the round. Some people called it a long count. Don King tried to use it to overturn the result, but Douglas was clearly in control. He knew exactly what he was doing. He got up at the right time, and more importantly, he was ready to keep fighting. 2 rounds later, Douglas delivers the most famous punch in boxing history. He lands a vicious right hand, then a stunning combination. Tyson crashes to the canvas. He's on his knees. He's groping for his mouthpiece like a drunk man searching for his keys. The referee counts to 10, and just like that, the upset of the century is complete. Douglas wins by knockout in the 10th round. The aftermath is chaos. Don King immediately starts screaming about the long count from the 8th round. He demands the result be overturned. He wants the sanctioning bodies to withdraw recognition of Douglas as champion, but the bodies refuse. Why? Because Douglas was clearly coherent when he got up. He was listening to the count. He knew exactly what he was doing. Meanwhile, Tyson in the 10th round was completely gone. He couldn't find his mouthpiece. He couldn't get up. The difference was obvious. Douglas himself explained it perfectly in a later interview. When asked about the knockdown, he said this: if Tyson was coherent, he would have just got up. But Tyson wasn't coherent. He was broken. Long before that final punch landed, Tyson was already defeated mentally. Douglas had broken through the aura. He had proven the so-called baddest man on the planet was human after all. What made this victory even more remarkable was how unprepared Tyson was. While Douglas trained with purpose and grief as his fuel, Tyson did nothing to prepare. He spent weeks in Tokyo living wildly. He was depressed. He had a revolving door of visitors in his hotel room. 19 days before the fight, Tyson got knocked down heavily in sparring. His corner was shameful under pressure. When Tyson's eye started swelling during the fight, they famously used a condom filled with ice to treat it. That's not the preparation of a champion. That's the preparation of someone who thinks he can't lose. But Douglas proved him wrong, and in doing so, Douglas showed what happens when talent meets preparation meets motivation. For one perfect night, everything aligned. That's the Douglas the world remembers. That's the fighter who changed boxing history forever. But here's what makes this fight so important to Douglas. It wasn't just about beating Tyson. It was about proving something to himself. Tyson tested his heart. Could Douglas take a punch and get back up? Could he stay composed under pressure? Could he finish the job when his body wanted to quit? The answer was yes. That night in Tokyo, Douglas showed more heart than anyone thought possible. Tyson forced him to dig deeper than ever before. That's why Tyson belongs on this list. 8 months later, Douglas faces his second toughest opponent. October 25th, 1990, Las Vegas, Nevada. Douglas is now the heavyweight champion of the world. He has all three major belts, the WBA, the WBC, the IBF. He's living his childhood dream, and he's getting paid $24 million to defend those belts against Evander Holyfield. But something has changed. After beating Tyson, Douglas found himself at the top of the boxing world. He enjoyed his success. He enjoyed it a little too much. He spent months stuffing himself with food. He stopped training with the same intensity. When he steps on the scale for the Holyfield fight, he weighs 246 pounds. That's 14.5 pounds heavier than he was for Tyson. Holyfield takes the exact opposite approach. He trains like a Spartan warrior. He's in superb condition. He prepares as if he's fighting a reincarnation of Joe Louis, not the flabby champion standing across from him. Holyfield doesn't care about Douglas's reputation. He doesn't care about the Tyson upset. He just trains and trains and trains. The fight starts and Douglas looks sluggish. He's plodding. He's slow. Holyfield dominates from the opening bell. He's faster. He's sharper. He's everywhere Douglas isn't. The end comes quickly. In the third round, Douglas telegraphs a slow-motion uppercut. It's predictable. It's lazy. Holyfield sees it coming from a mile away. He feints to draw out the punch. Douglas overcommits. And Holyfield steps back with a perfect right cross. It's a technical masterpiece. The punch lands clean. Douglas flops. He goes down flat on his back. He lies there motionless and disoriented. Unlike in Tokyo, he makes no attempt to beat the count. The referee counts to 10. Douglas's 257-day reign as champion is over. This wasn't a lucky punch from Holyfield. This was a calculated counter. Holyfield studied Douglas. He knew Douglas would throw that uppercut. He baited him into it. And when Douglas took the bait, Holyfield was ready. It was a perfect example of preparation beating talent. Holyfield didn't just train his body, he trained his mind. He knew what Douglas would do before Douglas did it. The contrast between the two fighters that night was staggering. Douglas looked like a man who thought he had already won. Holyfield looked like a man who knew the real fight was just beginning. Douglas had spent months celebrating his Tyson victory. Holyfield had spent months preparing for his moment. When they met in the ring, only one of them was ready for war. Douglas retired immediately after this fight. He couldn't face what had happened. He had reached the top of the mountain and then fallen off in just 8 months. The shame of it crushed him. For years, he couldn't talk about it without feeling the weight of his own failure. This loss haunts Douglas. Years later, when he talks about his top 3 fights, he mentions coming back and winning a title. He's not talking about this fight. He's talking about a minor comeback in 1998 where he won a small belt just to redeem himself for this moment. That's how much the Holyfield loss hurt. So why is Holyfield on this list? Because he exposed the truth about discipline. Holyfield didn't beat Douglas with power. He beat him with preparation. He made Douglas pay for every mistake, every lazy punch, every moment of sloppiness. Holyfield showed that talent isn't enough. You need discipline, you need focus, you need to respect your opponent. Douglas learned that lesson the hard way, and it's a lesson he never forgot. But to understand both the Tyson victory and the Holyfield defeat, we need to go back 3 years earlier. May 30th, 1987, Las Vegas, Nevada. Douglas faces Tony Tucker for the vacant IBF heavyweight title. This fight is the key to understanding everything. Tony Tucker is not a household name today, but in 1987, he's an elite fighter. He comes into this fight undefeated, 34 wins, 0 losses, 29 knockouts. He's 6'5", he has excellent skills, and he's about to prove just how good he really is. The fight starts, and Douglas looks great. He's using his jab effectively. He's landing combinations. He's moving well. After 9 rounds, the fight is incredibly close. One judge has Douglas ahead 86-85. Another judge has Tucker ahead 86-85. The third judge has it even at 86-86. Douglas is in position to win his first major title. Then something happens in the 10th round. Douglas fades. His focus slips. His energy drops. Tucker senses the shift. He starts landing his long jab. He puts Douglas on the ropes. He unloads a barrage of punches. The referee stops the fight. Tucker wins by technical knockout. This loss defines Douglas's reputation for years. People say he quits. They say he's talented but lazy. They say he has a lackadaisical approach. His father, Billy Douglas, is furious. Not just because his son lost, but because his son had the skills to win and didn't use them. But here's what people forget about Tony Tucker. He wasn't just some random opponent. After beating Douglas, Tucker went straight into a unification bout with Mike Tyson. This was August 1st, 1987, just 2 months after the Douglas fight, and Tucker gave Tyson the hardest fight of his entire 1980s run. Tucker became the first man to take Tyson the full 12-round distance. He didn't just survive, he competed. He made Tyson work for every second of every round. Think about what that means. Douglas was beating Tucker on the scorecards after 9 rounds. Douglas had the skills to compete with a man who would push prime Tyson to the limit. That's not a weak performance, that's elite-level boxing. The tragedy wasn't that Douglas lacked talent. The tragedy was that he couldn't maintain it for 3 more rounds. 6 years later, Tucker proved his quality again. In 1993, he faced Lennox Lewis. Lewis was in his prime. He was younger. He was faster. He was the future of the division. But Tucker, now past his best years, still gave Lewis a war. Another 12-round distance fight. Another performance that showed Tucker belonged among the elite. This context makes the 1987 loss even more painful for Douglas. He didn't lose to a nobody. He lost to a legitimate top-tier heavyweight, but he lost because his mind wandered, because his focus broke, because when the moment came to take over and finish the fight, he couldn't do it. Tucker didn't have more talent than Douglas. He had more mental strength. And in boxing, that's often the difference between winning and losing. Tucker goes on to prove he's the real deal. He gives prime Mike Tyson his hardest fight of the 1980s. He becomes the first man to take Tyson the full 12-round distance. Years later, he gives prime Lennox Lewis a war. Tucker is underrated, but he's elite, and he beat a very good version of Douglas. So why is Tucker on this list? Because he tested Douglas's focus. Could Douglas stay locked in for 12 full rounds? Could he finish a fight when he was winning? Could he push through when things got hard? Against Tucker, the answer was no. Douglas had the skills. He had the tools, but he couldn't maintain his concentration. Tucker punished him for that, and that loss became the ghost that haunted Douglas for 3 years. Now let's bring this all together. 3 fighters, 3 very different challenges. Mike Tyson tested Douglas's heart. Could he survive the most dangerous puncher in the world? Could he get up from a knockdown? Could he finish the fight when everything was on the line? Evander Holyfield tested Douglas's discipline. Could he train properly when he was already a champion? Could he respect his opponent? Could he avoid the traps of success? Tony Tucker tested Douglas's focus. Could he stay mentally sharp for 12 rounds? Could he close the show when he was winning? Could he overcome his own weaknesses? Each fighter revealed a different truth about Douglas. With Tyson, Douglas was perfect. He was motivated by his mother's death. He was prepared. He was focused. He executed his game plan flawlessly, and he showed incredible heart by getting up in the 8th round. That version of Douglas was unstoppable. With Holyfield, Douglas failed completely. He let success make him lazy. He showed up out of shape. He paid the price. Holyfield didn't just beat Douglas, he embarrassed him. And that embarrassment taught Douglas a lesson about discipline he would never forget. With Tucker, Douglas showed both his potential and his weakness. He proved he could compete with elite fighters. But he also proved he couldn't always finish what he started. Tucker exposed the mental gap between being good and being great. Here's the interesting part. When Douglas was asked to name his top 3 fights in a live Life by Design interview, he didn't name Tyson, Holyfield, or Tucker. Instead, he named 3 moments. Winning the heavyweight championship, the fight right before winning the championship, and coming back to win a title years later. He didn't focus on the opponents. He focused on what those moments meant to him personally. That tells you everything you need to know about Buster Douglas. For him, the toughest opponent was never the man across the ring. It was always himself, his own discipline, his own focus, his own heart. Tyson, Holyfield, and Tucker just happened to be the fighters who forced him to confront those battles. Against Tyson, Douglas conquered himself. He became the fighter he always could have been. Against Tucker and Holyfield, Douglas lost to himself. He showed the weaknesses that had always held him back. That's why these 3 fighters matter, not because of who they were, but because of what they revealed about Douglas. The Tokyo version of Douglas was almost mythical. He was perfect for one night. He had the skills, the focus, the discipline, and the heart all working together. That's the Douglas who shocked the world. But the Douglas who lost to Tucker and Holyfield was the real Douglas. Talented beyond measure, but undermined by his own nature. In the end, Buster Douglas's 3 toughest opponents taught him 3 lessons. Tyson taught him about heart. Holyfield taught him about discipline. Tucker taught him about focus. And together they defined not just his career, but his entire life. Because the toughest boxer Buster Douglas ever fought wasn't in the ring. It was the one he faced in the mirror every single day.